Hey guys, Redneck Mini 14 here, and today we're going to talk even more about the Charlie Kirk assassination. Today's topic is going to be the angle of the shot and why it matters. So yesterday, as I was looking around on YouTube, I came across a video from another YouTuber named Matt Kester. And Matt Kester is, he has made several videos about the Charlie Kirk assassination and how it is possible for the shooter to have done what he did. He talked about the possibility of him hiding the rifle in his pants, broke down. He talked about, whether or not it's possible to hit a target at 200 yards after the gun's been disassembled and reassembled. In other words, whether or not the scope would hold zero. And he, did his own testing and experimenting on this, and he came up that it is possible. So, you should go check out Matt Kester's YouTube channel. In this particular video, he was talking about how it's possible that the .30-06 could enter Charlie Kirk's body and how it could not possibly have an exit wound. So he talked about, how, because a lot of people talk about how, they've shot deer, all their life and they've always had an exit wound. And he talked about how the anatomy of a deer and a human is different, and the bone structure and everything, because they're a quadrupedal animal versus a bipedal animal, and so it does make a bit of a difference. He also talked about the Martin Luther King assassination and how Martin Luther King was shot with a .30-06 from a higher elevation, shot into his jaw. And it came out of his jaw and into his neck and down into his shoulder. And he didn't have an exit wound either. And somebody else mentioned in the comment section that there was a victim of the Kent State massacre, which happened back in the 70s, where one of the victims was shot in her arm, and the bullet went from her arm into her chest cavity and did not exit her body. And that was a .30-06 full metal jacket shot from an M1 Garand. I'm not sure, what the distance was, how far away she was when she was shot, but she didn't have an exit wound either, and that was a .30-06. So it is possible to not have an exit wound with a .30-06 because it's happened twice in history. Granted, the girl at Kent State, it was more broadside and the bullet went through her arm, most likely through her arm bone and not necessarily just the flesh on her arm. So that does play a factor. Anyway, if you want to go check out these videos or Matt Kester's channel, I will link it in the description. And he did say that he was going to make his own way to test his theory on how the .30-06 could possibly not have an exit wound. I would love to do this myself, but that takes a lot of ballistics gel, a lot of meat targets and bones, and a lot of different loads, and being able to shoot from a certain angle, and I just don't have the money or the time, mainly the money, because that's a lot of testing, because there's a lot of different possibilities there. I would love to do that, but I can't. What I do want to talk about today is the importance of the shot angle, because some people have made videos trying to show how it's impossible for a .30-06 to not have an exit wound. I've seen videos of people shooting a meat target from like 10 feet away. And so they shot it from 10 feet away with a .30-06 or a .303 British or whatever they shot it with, and it just totally destroyed it. Well, in one of my previous videos, I talked about the fact that at a certain distance, you're going to lose so much of your velocity and so much of your energy, and that plays a role. The other thing is that most of these people that are testing this theory, again, for one, they're not at the right distance. Either they're up close or they're maybe at 100 yards. I don't know if anybody's done it at more than 100 yards, but supposedly the exact distance was 142 yards. Even if you go to 140 or 150, I'd say that's definitely within the realm of being accurate. but they're all on the same plane. And so they're going, the bullet's going straight at a perpendicular angle. And Charlie Kirk was shot at from a higher angle. And I've seen people say that it could have been anywhere between 8 and 12 degrees. I'd say it could even possibly be up to 15 degrees, but I think it would be no more than 15 degrees. And that does play a role. So, what one person said, let's talk about this aspect first. What one person said was that he has a stack of steel targets that have all kinds of holes through them from a 30-06. Okay, so let's talk about steel targets for a second. This is I think this is a 1/4 inch piece of steel, so this isn't even rifle rated. This is mainly for like 22s and maybe like 9mm or something like that. So let's talk about the fact that there are different types of steel, even rifle rated steel targets. If you shoot them from too close of a range, you can go through those steel targets. Ask me how I know. Because my father-in-law actually did it. He stupidly took a shot at a steel target, and I think it was a 3/8 steel target, and shot at it from like 7 yards. Went right through with an AR-15. So obviously steel can, 30-06 can definitely penetrate steel. Now, they say you're supposed to have your steel targets at an angle, so something like this. Now, this is a free free hanging target. So the idea is that you would have 2 hooks, and it would free hang like this, and when you hit it, it'll go back, and all the spatter would go down. So that's the idea behind a free hanging target versus a stationary target where you have to have it at an angle like this. So with the distance and having the target at an angle, that keeps the bullet from going through. Obviously, if it's not rifle rated, even at 100 yards, it'll go through. But depending on the angle, let's say it's at a 45-degree angle, even if it's not a rifle rated round, the bullet, let's just take a 30-06 casing or 30-06 bullet here. The bullet, if it's at like say a 45-degree angle, can possibly be deflected. Now that's a little bit more exaggerated of an angle. But let's talk about, say, water. If you shoot let's say a 22. So if you shoot a 22 into water, if you shoot it directly down, so let's just use this as an example. If you shoot directly down into the water with anything, the bullet is not going to ricochet back up. But if you shoot it at an angle, it'll bounce off. 22 Plinkster a while back did a trick shot with a 22 where he bounced the bullet off of the water and hit like a balloon or something. And even if you go back and look at one of my old videos, now this isn't bouncing it off of water, this is just the ground. But I have an old video where I was shooting I think it was a Volunteer Arms Commando Mark 45 or something. It's kind of similar to a Tommy gun. And I was shooting that, and the targets that I was shooting at were on the ground, and they were not close enough to the backstop. And a lot of people were saying, oh, you can see that the bullets are ricocheting off the ground and hitting the backstop, and some were going over. And they were right. I was young and dumb and didn't really think about things like ricochets back then. I'm a little more educated now, and I know a little more about safety and stuff. So, sometimes we make mistakes, but they were right. The bullets, and this was, 45 ACP, but the bullets were bouncing off the ground and going over the berm behind it. But the same concept can be used with any caliber of gun. So whether it's a 30-06, a 223, a 45 ACP, whatever. If you shoot something and hit it from the right angle, it'll ricochet. And it doesn't have to be something. It doesn't have to be steel. Like I said, it could be the ground. It could be water. It could be rock, bone. Now, there is a concept called we'll just talk about the brush gun concept. So, let me get the actual bullets out. So, this is a 30-06. This is a 45-70. This is a 180 grain Federal Power Shock. This is a 300 grain Winchester Super X is what this is. So the concept of a brush gun is that you want to have a round, a bullet, that has enough mass and enough weight to carry through tree branches. So if it hits a tree branch, it won't deflect. So this is a little bit thicker than what you might want to try shooting through, but this is the best I got. So a 30-06, we'll turn it this way. So 30-06 is more pointed, and it's typically a lower grain weight than a 45-70 or even like a 35 Remington, 444 Marlin. So, and it's just not as big a round. So unless the round hits directly in the middle, chances are if it's a little bit higher, it'll deflect up. If it's a little bit lower, it'll deflect down, and it won't just deflect and keep going. Chances are it'll clip the actual tree branch, and it'll bust it a little bit. Maybe not bust it all the way, but it'll bust the branch a bit, and it'll deflect, and it will tumble. Whereas, and this is a 300 grain, this actually is a little bit lighter than what you would want to use for a brush gun on a 45-70. You might look into something like a 405 grain or something, maybe even bigger. But something like this, it's bigger. This is a 45 caliber bullet versus a 30 caliber bullet. It's wider, it's got a flatter nose, so it is less likely to deflect because the bullet, what happens is the bullet is taking the path of least resistance. So if it's higher, it's going to bounce up. If it's lower, it'll bounce down. It just depends on where the bullet hits on the branch and where the bullet hits on the bullet itself. But with something wider and heavier, chances are it'll go straight through and not be deflected. That's the concept of a brush gun, and why brush guns, lever action specifically, or single shots even, are used quite often in the woods. So your 30-30s, your 35 Remingtons, your 444 Marlins, your 45-70s, things like that. And that's why those are better guns to hunt with in the woods. Alright, going back and talking about the angle of the shot, I think what a lot of people don't understand is that when you shoot at an angle, the bullet has more to travel through. So let's take this drill bit box, for instance. If you shot the bullet straight through at a perpendicular angle, it's only going to have, let's actually measure this and try to get this as accurate as possible. That's only about 2 inches of plastic. So that's at a perpendicular angle, and that's what a lot of people are testing at. They're shooting directly into the meat target or the ballistics gel dummies or whatever they're shooting at. They're shooting directly at it. But if they shot at an angle, and I don't know how you find the exact angle, there's a lot of calculating there, and you have to figure out the elevation at the specific distance that you have to be versus the target. That's a lot of thinking, a lot of math that I'm just not qualified to do, but there are people who are qualified to do it, and I believe that Matt Kester can figure this out. Now, whether or not he proves the likelihood of there not being an exit wound is a different story. I don't think he's come out with that video yet. I think he's still getting all of his stuff together. But if somebody were to take a 30-06 and shoot this box from, let's just say, a 45-degree angle, which is a lot more significant of an angle, you're talking about 3 inches. So that's a whole another inch. And that's just based off of something this size. Now, I get that the neck is not a very thick part of the body. In fact, my neck is probably only about 6 inches from front to back. But given a certain angle, you're probably adding a few extra inches there. And with the concept of hitting something at an angle, we're talking about hitting the bones beneath the flesh here, not the flesh itself. But the concept of hitting something at an angle, or in this case it would be like this, so the bullet comes in at whatever angle, it is possible that it would deflect down. People have also talked about the possibility that the wound in his neck was not from the bullet. Some people talked about, it's probably from, body armor. I don't think he had body armor. If you look at the pictures, and a lot of people have said, yes, he did have body armor. A lot of people said, no, he didn't. I am on the side of the fence that says he probably didn't have body armor, just based off of the pictures that I've seen. But some people did talk about the fact that, if he was shot in the collarbone, some people are saying, oh, it ricocheted off his collarbone. Well, that's not very likely, even at that angle. In fact, that would be more, with the collarbone versus the spine, that would be more head-on, just with the shape of the collarbone and everything. But it could have hit the collarbone, broke part of the collarbone, and part of the bone is what went into his neck and hit his carotid artery. That was a theory that Matt Kester talked about. It is possible, I suppose. We don't have the autopsy yet, the autopsy results yet. And yes, there was an autopsy. Look it up. Look up Lauren the Mortician. She'll tell you that yes, there was an autopsy done. So anyway, if he was shot in the collarbone, he wouldn't have been shot in the neck, and the collarbone, goes, if the bullet went into his collarbone, it could have hit his spine at that angle and went down, possibly hit something else or whatever. Again, we don't have the results of the autopsy, but it is possible with the angle, depending on the type of load that he used, the powder charge, all these things combined, it is possible. Again, I don't have the means, the money, the time to actually test this theory. Trust me, I would love to. I think Matt Kester is getting everything together to test this theory. So I look forward to his video. If you want to check out his channel, I'll link it in the description. If you want to check out Lauren the Mortician, I'll link that in the description. You can also look up 22 Plinkster and try to find his trick shot where he bounced the bullet off the water. And I think, I could be wrong, I don't know who it was, if it was 22 Plinkster, if it was Demolition Ranch, but I thought somebody at some point in time did some sort of a trick shot where they bounced a bullet, I don't know what kind of bullet, but they bounced a bullet off of not one, but 2 steel plates. In other words, they shot it at a certain angle, hit here, and it bounced, ricocheted, hit another steel plate on the other side, ricocheted off of that, and hit whatever they were shooting at. I could have swore that was a video. I can't remember who did it though. I thought it was Demolition Ranch. I went back. He's got a lot of videos to go through, and I don't even know what he would have titled his video. But I'll go through and try to find it, and if I find it after this video is uploaded, I will link it in the description. But anyway, you can go check out all those videos, all those channels. They cover basically all the information that I just gave you today. Like I said, I'm not a scientist. I'm not an expert in these things. but I do know a little bit about guns, a little bit about bullets, a little bit about how they react when they hit certain things, just from my experience with shooting and all the videos that I've seen other people do with ballistics gel and other targets, and just how bullets react. Bullets don't always react the same way. Talk about, say, if you watch the movie Jurassic Park, Dr. Malcolm was always talking about chaos theory. It's unpredictability. You will never have the same outcome twice. And with shooting, that's a very, very accurate statement. You could make the same shot 100 times at the same type of target and not have the same result twice. So that says a lot about how guns and bullets react to targets.
Hey, before I go, I just thought I'd remind everybody that I do have a second channel called Redneck Off the Range. Over there, I post most of my non-gun related content, so whether it's a video on my new tractor, my power tools, my projects that I'm working on, maybe wild game recipes, or just a random vlog, I post all of this kind of content over on my secondary channel. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, go check it out, Redneck Off the Range. But that's all for this video, so subscribe to my channel, like me on Facebook. I'm Redneck Mini 14, and until next time, be safe.